Alright, we're going to be modding the front forks on the CS-1. First step is to loosen the Allen head bolt on the fork in order to take out the front axle from the forks. Once you loosen and remove the Allen head screw, you should be able to pull the axle out in its entirety. You want to keep an eye out. There's two spacers, one on either side of the wheel, as shown in this image here. Once you remove the axle and the spacers from the fork tubes, you should be able to lift the front end up and pull the wheel out. Go ahead and set that off to the side. The next step is to loosen the 4 bolts holding the front fender on. They're located up inside the fender. Once you go ahead and take the front fender off the bike, go ahead and set that off to the side. The next step will be to loosen and remove the 2 bolts holding the brake caliper to the fork tubes. These tend to be pretty tight, so be careful. After that, the next step will be to remove the caliper, let that hang off to the side. We're going to go ahead and remove the 2 top nuts from the top triple tree. These hold the springs inside the fork tubes. These are extremely tight, so be careful. A tip here, if you don't have metric wrenches this large, a 1 1/16 standard wrench will work perfect. Go ahead and remove those top caps. This next image shows the top caps coming off and the spacers that are inside the fork tubes. Don't worry about the spacers now, you can leave those. Just move the top caps off to the side. Go ahead and loosen up the nut holding the turn signals on. Those are attached to the fork tubes, as well as the lower triple tree Allen head bolts. This will allow us to remove the fork tubes from the triple trees. Here I'm loosening the lower Allen head bolt from the triple tree in order to drop the fork tubes. You want to be very careful once you do this. There's fluid inside the fork tubes. Once we remove the forks, we're going to go ahead and drain those tubes. Have a oil catch pan nearby and go ahead and drain those tubes out. Once you have those both removed and drained, take care when you're draining them. As you notice, I'm holding the spring and spacer inside the fork tubes as I'm draining them so they don't just fall out. Because the next step will be to remove them in order. So first the top caps, then we have spacers, then we have washers. That's the order in which they come out of the tubes. The next you're going to go ahead and pull the springs out of the fork tubes and set those off to the side. Here we have the tool which goes inside the fork tube that we've supplied with the kit. As you see here, vice grips hold the end of the tool in place as it locks down inside, and on the other end we have an Allen bolt that we're going to have to remove. So slide the tool down inside, twist it until it locks, and on the other end you'll see here we have an Allen wrench that holds the bolt on the bottom. I like to use a wrench on the Allen head bolt so that we get a little leverage. This bolt here tends to be very tight. So once you loosen that, go ahead and undo the Allen bolt from the bottom of the fork tubes. You see me holding here, this is the tool. Make sure that holds in place. That's going to lock inside there. What we're doing right here is we're taking out the damper rods. If you notice here on the bottom, that's the Allen head bolt. It has a copper crush washer on there. Make sure you don't lose that copper crush washer. It's really important to make sure there's an oil tight seal. Remove your fork tube tool And this is where we're going to go ahead and take out the damper rods. It's your damper rod, and there's also a spring attached right there. Set those off to the side because that's where we're going to be lowering the units. Do the same thing to the other fork tube. There's a picture of the damper rod and the rebound spring. Go ahead and stick your Allen wrench into the Allen bolt in the bottom of the fork tubes. Loosen that, take that out. Go ahead and take the tool out of this one. And then let's go ahead and take out the damper rod. The next step will be to insert the lowering spacers that are supplied with the kit. This is once again showing the bottom Allen head bolt that comes out of the forks. Just make sure you have that copper crush washer on both sides. That's important for an oil tight seal. Here it is shown again in the still image. So the next step now is to go ahead and add the lowering spacers to the damper rods first. Then the next step will be to add the springs, the original springs, to those damper rods. This is going to lower the forks by 2 inches. There's a still image showing the order in which they go on. Once you have those in order, go ahead and slide those into the fork tubes. If you tilt them back, they'll go ahead and slide all the way to the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add those Allen bolt screws back into the bottoms. Now just take care that you have the copper crush washer attached to the Allen bolt before you insert it. So we're going to go ahead and stick that Allen wrench in the bottom and the tool back in the top. Make sure the tool locks in to the damper rods. Notice there's a nut at the end of the tool. Slide that in. You can choose to either use vice grips or a screwdriver through the end of the tool to hold it in place. You may need a little bit of leverage because these tend to be pretty tight. Stick your Allen wrench back in and tighten up that lower Allen head bolt. If you're doing this by yourself, sometimes it helps to kneel on the fork itself, and I use a wrench for a little extra leverage, tightening the Allen bolt on the bottom. Here you can see I'm tightening that up. You don't want to over tighten it, but you definitely want to hold the tool in place while you tighten it down. It's important for an oil tight seal. Go ahead and remove your tool out and do the same thing with the other fork tube. Once you have both those in, we're going to go ahead and put the springs back in. And take note that the tightly wound progressive end of the spring is going to be at the top of the fork tubes. Insert your springs into the fork tubes. Do that on both sides. The next thing that goes in will be the washer. So it goes springs, then washers, then spacers. Now don't worry about the spacers at this point because they're only going to go in halfway because we lowered the fork tubes. And I'm going to show you in the next video how to press those spacers down in. This is just an example of where they go in the order. So it goes springs, washers, then spacers, as in this image here. So now we're going to go ahead and insert the fork tubes inside the triple tree. Now when we slide this in, it's important to take note that you need to install the turn signals and the handlebars if you're going to use them, the turn signals that is, before you tighten this Allen head bolt down. In this video I haven't done it, but here's a still image to show you what I'm talking about. Make sure you slide the handlebars in as well as the turn signals. before you do these next steps, which is tightening down the lower triple tree Allen head bolt. This bolt is what holds the fork tubes in place. So now in this video, I'm going to go ahead and slide the fork tube up, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the lower triple tree mount. That's the Allen head bolt we shown earlier. Once you go ahead and slide those in and tighten that Allen head bolt down, we're going to go ahead and fill it with fork oil. Now it's important to note when you fill it with fork oil that the factory specs say 15 ounces per fork. Now you can either measure this out, but an easier way to go is to compress the fork tubes up, compress them like I am doing here in this image, and then fill them to the top. That should be exactly 15 ounces. And what I mean by that is here, see I'm holding the fork tube compressed in the compressed position, and I'm filling them all the way to the top. That will equal out to 15 ounces. You can do both fork tubes with 1 quart of fork oil, or as I'm using here, automatic transmission fluid, which works just as well. Once those are filled with oil, we're going to go ahead and push the spacers down with the top caps. Now this can be a tricky job. You may want 2 people to do this job, but here's a picture of the spacers as they stick out. We're going to compress those down with the top threaded caps. Okay, it's important to note that this is tricky and can be somewhat dangerous if you don't push them down far enough or if you don't catch the threads. These can pop right out of their spots. Here's the ultimate goal, is to have those tightened down. So as you see in this video, what I'm doing now is I'm tightening down the left one. In the next shot, you're going to see me pushing down and twisting the wrench at the same time in order to get those caps threaded without popping back out. So it's kind of tricky. This may require a second person. It's a good thing to note, if you want to find where the thread catches, that's a good way to start. Before you push it down, you want to find where the thread catches in the top fork tube. It can help this process, knowing exactly where to push down. So right here, I know that the wrench will catch threads right there. So I push down extremely hard and twist at the same time. And if you do this just right, that shouldn't pop out. Go ahead and tighten up those fork tubes, the top caps. Once you have both sides tightened, you're pretty much finished. You go ahead and tighten those up, and then you go ahead and do the reverse of what I expected earlier. Tighten the top caps, put the wheel on, put the axle and the spacers in, tighten up the axle, then the locking Allen head bolt at the end of the forks. Hook your brake caliper back up, and that's it.